So every day there is new news on the polls and the fundraising numbers and even the evolving logistics of the gigantic Democratic presidential primary. And, you know, we can run through that stuff anytime you want. There is an infinite supply of that any day of the week. But that horse race stuff will always be with us, and it is only part of the way the competition is being waged. If you are, for example, Senator Bernie Sanders, now waging your second run for the presidency in 4 years, this week, for example, has been very, very, very busy already, and it's only Wednesday. Yesterday, Senator Sanders announced a bicameral resolution, a House and Senate resolution, to declare the climate crisis a national emergency. It is a national emergency resolution. This follows, of course, President Trump declaring a pulled out of thin air national emergency to build his border wall and, inexplicably, to sell weapons to Saudi Arabia for its war in Yemen. That resolution from Senator Sanders calling to declare the climate crisis a national emergency, that was yesterday. And then today, the senator released what he's calling his anti-endorsement list, in which he quotes FDR, "I ask you to judge me by the enemies I have made." In Senator Sanders' case, that's a list by his own accounting that includes a bunch of billionaires and CEOs of Fortune 500 companies and titans of Wall Street, like the former heads of JP Morgan Chase and Goldman Sachs, as well as former Federal Reserve Chairman Alan Greenspan, a whole list of famous dudes who have all criticized him by name. In unveiling this extraordinary list, Senator Sanders accused the people on that list of having a, quote, vested interest in preserving the status quo so they can continue to exploit working people across America. Quote, "We welcome their hatred." Then just tonight, Senator Sanders wrote an op-ed in the Washington Post. The headline you can see there: "The straightest path to racial equality is through the 1%. Quote, "The unfortunate truth is that politicians who take checks from millionaires and billionaires owe their corporate constituents first and everyday Americans last. The black-white wealth gap could be closed by targeting the extreme wealth at the very top. Instead, politicians beholden to the 1% ask the black middle class and the white middle class to fight over the scraps." Busy, right? Busy. Joining us now for the interview is Senator Bernie Sanders from the great state of Vermont, candidate for the Democratic nomination for president in 2020. Senator, it's great to see you. Thanks for being here.
Good to be with you, Rick.
I'm not going to ask you horse race and process questions, but I do want to know, I mean, in 2016, pretty soon into it, you were essentially running in a 2-person primary.
Yes.
How is it different to run in a 2 million person primary?
It is very different.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the difference is that last time we had to win 50% of the vote in order to win a state, and we ended up winning 22 states. I think this time around, I doubt that anybody will come close to 50% of the vote in any state. So I think you're talking about candidates getting 25 or 30% of the vote. I feel very good with the fact that we have now received some 2 million individual contributions, which I think is an all-time world's record up to this point, averaging all of $19 apiece. We got over 1 million volunteers. We have strong organizations in the early states, Iowa, New Hampshire, et cetera. So we're feeling pretty good.
Knowing that that ceiling might be different in terms of what's possible, even for the strongest campaigns in the early states, how do you change your strategy to account for that, or your ad plan?
Well, I think it's more aggressively getting out the vote and grassroots organizing. I mean, at the end of the day, you're just going to have to get people out to the caucuses and get votes in the primaries in order to win. And that means having strong organizations in the states and having a strong volunteer movement, and I think we have both.
In terms of the character of the primary thus far, obviously we're not that far into it. We've only had the one debate, and there's still a ton of people who are in the field. But a lot of people have remarked on the fact that people are playing your song, that a lot of your progressive policy positions that you staked out not only over the course of your career, but in your 2016 campaign, are now much more centrist positions among this field. Is that just a matter of satisfaction for you, or does that give you new work to do?
Well, both. It is a deep sense of satisfaction. I mean, you followed the last campaign. You were there in the debates. And many of the ideas that I brought forth, $15 an hour minimum wage. Hey, Bernie, you're crazy. That's too extreme. In a few days, the U.S. House of Representatives is going to pass a $15 an hour minimum wage. Bernie, public colleges and universities, tuition free. That can't be done. University of Texas today announced for families 60,000 or under free tuition, and all over the country people are moving in that direction. Dealing with student debt. Oh, Bernie, that can't be done. Well, now you're hearing a whole lot of people understanding that it is an outrage. It really is criminal that you have young people out there who can't get married, can't have kids because they're dealing with incredible rates of student debt right now. Dealing with climate change as a national security issue. I was asked in one debate, I don't know if it was one that you read, Bernie, what is the major national security crisis we face? ISIS, Al-Qaeda, what is? I said it is climate change. And people kind of laughed. Well, they're not laughing today. Healthcare as a human right. Oh, Bernie, that's un-American. Nobody in America believes that. Last poll that I saw, 60-70% of the American people believe in a Medicare for all single-payer program. So the good news is we have moved, not only have we moved the debate, we've moved legislation in states and in the federal government. But now what has to be done, Rachel, and I think I'm the only candidate who will tell you this, is that at the end of the day, it's not good enough to talk about Medicare for all, to talk about being aggressive on climate change. What we have got to do is understand there is a reason why in the last 30 years, the top 1% have seen an increase in their wealth of $21 trillion, while wealth has gone down for the bottom half. Why 500,000 people are sleeping out on the street. Why we are the only major country not to guarantee health care to all people or parental leave or sick and medical leave. There is a reason. And the reason is, and what this campaign is about, is finally saying that if you want real change, we need a political revolution. And what does that mean? It means we are going to have to take on Wall Street and the insurance companies and the drug companies and the fossil fuel industry and the military industrial complex and the prison industrial complex. In other words, we can talk about all the great things we want to do, but at the end of the day, to understand why we are where we are, where the middle class is shrinking, where 40 million people are living in poverty, we have to understand the political reality of America and the power structure of America. We are prepared to take those guys on, and that's why I say unapologetically, I am not afraid of those people. They want to condemn me. You know, the billionaires want to condemn me, that I'm an existential threat to the Democratic Party. So be it. We're going to take them on.
In terms of how that translates practically, I'm hearing echoes of your first answer in the debate in Miami, when the question was something along the lines of what do you want to do first? And you talked about this need for a political revolution and the need to sort of take on multi-front battles all at the same time. If you were elected president in 2020, odds are, I don't know, let's guess, 50-50 that Senator Mitch McConnell would still be the leader of the Republicans in the Senate and they'd still hold the majority there. You know from being in the Senate what that means in terms of the power of getting legislation through. If, I know you don't want McConnell to still be there. If he is still there, what would you put on his plate first? What would be your first legislative priority?
I'll tell you, before I put anything on his plate, I would be in the state of Kentucky holding a rally with tens of thousands of people to say to what is in fact one of the poorest states in this country, a real struggling state in Kentucky, that we need to raise the minimum wage, a state which is really suffering for lack of health care. We're going to rally the American people in Kentucky. We're going to rally the American people in Mississippi. We're going to rally the people in South Carolina to demand that their representatives, I know this is a radical idea, actually do what the American people want. The point that I make over and over again, Rachel, is the ideas that I talk about are ideas that the American people want. They don't get it because you got a Congress indebted to wealthy campaign contributors. And by the way, whether you call it socialism or social democracy or progressive government, everything that I'm talking about exists in countries like Norway, Sweden, Denmark, where they have health care for all, where they have strong universal child care programs, where college education is free. These are not radical ideas, but we need to rally the American people by the millions. That's what I mean by a political revolution. And as president, that's what I will help lead. We will give Mitch McConnell something he cannot afford to refuse. And that is, we're going to give him millions of people demanding that he take action on the issues impacting the working class of this country.
We'll be right back with Senator Bernie Sanders, Democratic 2020 presidential candidate, right after this. Stay with us. We're back with Senator Bernie Sanders of the great state of Vermont. He is running to be the Democratic nominee for President of the United States. Senator Sanders, thank you again for sticking with us. You talked about climate change as an emergency, and indeed this week you introduced bicameral legislation with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in the House to declare a climate emergency. You have also said just this week that you will be coming out with the strongest climate change plan in the current Democratic field. And I know you haven't released details of that yet, but how do you define it as the strongest? What
it will do, and there are other good plans out there, I don't mean to denigrate other plans. What it will do is essentially tell the fossil fuel industry that they cannot continue to destroy this planet for the sake of their short-term profits. I mean, just stop and think about it. They lie every day. They're obfuscating reality. They're making huge amounts of money. And, oh, by the way, they're destroying the planet. So somebody's got to say, sorry, you know, we don't accept people shooting down other people. You are destroying this planet. Thousands and thousands of people will die as a result of what you're doing. It has to change. We have to transform our energy system into energy efficiency, sustainable energy. We need a new transportation system as well. And the other point here, Rachel, is obviously this is not just an American issue. This is a global issue by definition. We need a president not like Trump, who doesn't even accept the reality of climate change, thinks it's a hoax. We need a president who says to every country on earth that, you know what, you are in this. China, you're in it. Russia, India, Brazil, Africa, we're all in this together. And maybe, now I know this may be a pipe dream, I admit it, but maybe in this crisis, planetary crisis, maybe we can move the world to say that instead of spending $1.5 trillion every year on weapons of destruction designed to kill each other, maybe we can use those resources to fight our common enemy, which is climate change. And as president, I would love the opportunity to lead that effort.
I think about a corporate-driven effort like that, going at the fossil fuel industry, going at big oil and energy, holding them accountable for their role in climate change. And I can envision an agenda like that in the United States. But then when you start to talk about the rest of the world, I think about, you know, Saudi Aramco, and I think about the big state-controlled oil companies or in our economic rivals around the world. And I can't imagine them not just seeing that as a competitive advantage.
Well, the answer is to rally the people in those countries. I think ordinary people in most of the countries understand that if we don't act boldly, the planet we're going to be leaving to our kids and grandchildren will be increasingly unhealthy and uninhabitable.
But as a U.S. president, you couldn't rally the Saudi people or the Chinese
Actually,
people.
you could.
You could?
Yeah, actually, you could.
How does that work in Riyadh?
Well, we'll see if Mohammed bin Salman will let me into the country.
For starters, yeah.
But I do think, I mean, people throughout the world understand what the threat is. And we need a grassroots movement globally. And we're beginning to see it, especially led by the young people. You know, and I think we are fighting for the future of the planet. This is an existential crisis. So we have to act in a way we have never acted before. And I think it's the people of the planet saying to oil companies all over this world, stop it. We cannot allow you to destroy the planet.
Let me ask you about another international effort that has been something you and I have talked about before in interviews over the years. I was struck today by new polling that shows that even Iraq and Afghanistan veterans do not believe that the Iraq and Afghanistan wars were worth fighting. And there are not big differences between the veterans who have fought those wars and the American people broadly on those issues. And you have told me in the past, and I know that you have been assiduous in your work on this in the past, about wanting to get American troops out of those conflicts. Why is it so intractable? Why are presidents as disparate as President Obama and President Trump both unable to achieve the stated goal of getting troops even just home from Afghanistan?
By the way, that's a good question. Before I answer it, I'm the former chairman of the Veterans Committee in the Senate, and I have talked to many of those veterans. And the kind of trauma that they went through is something that we should never dismiss or never forget. They know, unlike Donald Trump, what the cost of war really is. They saw their friends blown up. They came back without an arm or a leg or with PTSD. But to answer your question, I think we need political will here. We need to do everything that we can to make sure that those countries around the world, and right now I'm not even thinking just of Iraq or Syria. I'm thinking about Saudi Arabia and Iran. We have spent, not only have we lost thousands of lives, Rachel, we have spent, I believe, $5 trillion on the war on terror, $5 trillion. And our job as the most powerful country on earth is to bring Saudi Arabia, which is a terribly despotic government, and Iran, which is also undemocratic, bring them into the damn room and saying, we're not going to be fighting eternal wars. You guys, we're here. You're going to work it out. But don't think that the United States is going to get involved in never-ending wars.
Let me ask you on the issue of veterans. You have been a champion of Medicare for all, and as
Yes.
I mentioned, a lot of your fellow candidates are now on board with you on that, including people saying from the dais in Miami, I'm with Bernie on this. What happens to veterans care under Medicare for all?
We strengthen, the VA is a separate entity, and it must remain as a separate entity because veterans have unique problems. So we maintain the Veterans Administration, and we strengthen
Sanders,
it.
can you stick with us for one more segment?
Sure.
We'll be right back with Senator Bernie Sanders right after this. Stay with us.